Hi everybody, I'm going to be giving a commentary with this poem, number 1339 of Emily Dickinson's, from this book, The Complete Poems of Emily Dickinson. And this first one's called A Bee, His Burnished Carriage. So, let me read the poem and then I'll give the commentary after that. A bee his burnished carriage drove boldly to a rose, combinedly alighting, himself his carriage was. The rose received his visit with frank tranquillity, withholding not a crescent to his cupidity. Their moment consummated, remained for him to flee, remained for her of rapture, but the humility. So it's kind of like a deflowering of the rose by the bee. And it's funny because the secret invention here is pretty much the bee as kind of a Cupid-like figure. So, for instance, the cupidity reveals like that idea of Cupidness of the bee. But it's interesting also because you normally don't think of like a bee as in a carriage. So that's another original idea where the bee, his burnished carriage, or a carriage could be like his body too, like, he walked his carriage down the street. It's not how we normally say things anymore, but that's how they did back then. But then again, it's drove boldly to a rose, so I guess you could think of it as a carriage like a horse-drawn carriage, but it's just a carriage with the bee. He drove boldly to a rose, so boldly, I don't know, like I would say I was starting to think that it might have something to do with Cupid, but Cupid's blind, so this has a little bit to do about Cupid, but um, not completely Cupid. So the metaphor is not a perfect Cupidness. Um, but the moment consummated remained for him to flee. So once he finished taking his pollen or being in the moment, consummating it, like as if you consummate a marriage, remained for him to flee. So this is kind of original too, that instead of consummating a marriage where the two lovers stay together married for ever and ever, the bee with the flower um, took off, it fled. So it had its thrill of getting the pollen, apparently, and it remained for the rose of rapture, but the humility remained for her of rapture, but the humility. And I'm pretty sure that humility kind of is allied to humiliation here. So the rose is is kind of a humiliated rose. So I guess she's thinking of like the battle of the sexes in some sense, but that's one symbolism. But I don't want to reduce to that. Um, but let me read it one more time. A bee his burnished carriage drove boldly to a rose, combiningly alighting himself. His carriage was. The rose received his visit with frank tranquillity, withholding not a crescent to his cupidity. Withholding not a crescent to his cupidity. The crescent of the rose, I think, means like the closing of the rose. So withholding not, it's meaning that it's that the rose is blooming, that it's open. Their moment consummated, remained for him to flee. So it actually doesn't seem like as if she, like the bee really has much choice. It says it remained for him to flee. That's she's saying that, well, that's its pretty much its only choice because the bee's not going to stay there with the rose, and it remained for her of rapture but the humility. Okay, so the I would say the discovery that's so original in this poem, other than the bee being related to Cupid in some sense, is the bee. Um, if you think of the word deflowering, like people say, like deflower a person or a virgin, that means to take their virginity away. That's kind of like this. He drove boldly, so there is a sense of the bee drove boldly his carriage. So there's kind of like a sense in like it's like a date where the person is in a carriage, the boyfriend's in a carriage driving it boldly to go see his lover, and there's this one part in here though that it's kind of not so much confusing me, but I'm just kind of thinking about it. Combiningly alighting himself, his carriage was. Um, I might have to go back and revisit that one. But the rose received his visit with frank tranquility. Tranquility is just kind of like peace, and frank, um, honest peace. So she accepted him. It's not as if it was a like a rape or anything like that. Withholding not a crescent to his cupidity, their moment consummated remained for him to flee, remained for her of rapture, but the humility. Um, that's it's interesting. Like she puts it up. She puts courting in a nutshell, uh, with this kind of parable of the rose and the bee, and it's kind of like a small version, a microcosm of our ways of like dating, but in this sense, um, it's just a kind of like a quick date. She doesn't talk about other bees and that rose, or other roses and that one bee, but you can kind of surmise it. Um, the bee also can go with the buccaneer buzz, which was like one of her other poems. She calls the bee a buccaneer buzz, or the debauchee of dews. The carriage, she talks about death having a carriage, which picks her up in the poem. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. And that's the first line and two lines in that famous poem. And also death driving too. But the beast in this sense probably isn't death, but there might be some kind of connection between it, death and the bee. Um, Boldly and rose. The rose has there's an attar to the rose, which is like a um, uh, like a oil that comes an attar from the rose, diffused the rose, and its smell she talks about in other poems. Um, Tranquility. I don't know where she uses that word in one of her other poems, but I know she does. Pretty much, I'm pretty sure. Crescent and cupidity, moment consummated, remained for him to flee. Um, Rapture, I know she uses before. And humility, there's a hum in humility, but that's just another kind of silliness. Okay, thanks for watching.